Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights, here with Rich Klein. We're going to do a tribute to Phil Niekro, the Knucksy, the famous knuckle-baller, but don't think he was just a knuckle-baller. He was a great athlete, has great stats. I'm not sure he's getting the hobby love. Seeing somebody passing, the silver lining is that his career gets a second look. And it's certainly worthy when you look at not just longevity, but a lot of excellence. If you can pitch till you're 48, that's pretty amazing. And you get people out with slow stuff. Thanks, sponsors, Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication, ComC.com, Burbank Sports Cards, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Heritage Auctions, Huggins and Scott Auctions, Topps, Upper Deck, and Panini. Phil Niekro, he's got lots of cards, but he's gone now at the age of 81 after he had cancer. So, Rich, welcome to the show. And Phil Niekro, I imagine he is somebody that when you started coming on strong with baseball, he was probably into his career. I observed him from the beginning.
I've talked about the first packs I really remember were third series 68s with all the superstars in them. He's in there too.
Yeah.
And he was coming off an NL ERA title, 1.87. His personal catcher in 67 was one Bob Uecker. And it's interesting because he and Uecker, for Niekro's first 3 years of their career, their cards actually parallel. I'm not going to talk about value, but parallel in what series they're in.
Yeah.
64, they're both high numbers. 65, they're both semi-highs. And 66, they're both first series cards. They weren't teammates or anything. They just had parallel cards. And his rookie card is a reasonably difficult high number card to get in 64. You do see it, but you don't see a lot of them compared to some of the other rookies of the time. And Hall of Fame high number rookie cards, that's one card I think that might actually be undervalued. And part of the issue was that he wasn't a fastball pitcher. He threw slowest and slowest.
But the thing that people don't realize, he wasn't a fastball pitcher, but he was a strikeout pitcher. The game is how do you get the guy out and how do you keep the other team from scoring runs? So we're talking about a guy that had earned run average title as well as a strikeout title. He led the league in strikeouts.
He also had a bunch of gold gloves along the way. He fielded his position very well. And it's interesting because one of his childhood friends was John Hondo Havlicek. And I believe they were high school teammates. And they both lasted a long time in their respective sports, more than most players do. Hondo was still a high-level basketball player, 36, 37 years old. And even in his last game, and there's a video of it, CBS televised it nationally, and they had to cut short the final time he left because the Masters insisted, you give us full coverage. And that was part of the Masters coverage. So you don't get to see Havlicek leave the court for the final time. But even in his last game, he was still at the age of 37, playing very effectively. Niekro had another 10 years at that point. So both of them were really good.
I think it's Bridgeport, Ohio. My family lived in Wheeling, West Virginia, across the river in those days. And so I think Hondo and Niekro, I think they were the same age or very close. And then, of course, Phil had his brother Joe, who also has passed away now. That's tough. I went to the Hall of Fame fantasy camp 13 years ago, I think, and the counselors, the Hall of Famers who were there, each got to bring a friend just to have fun. And so Ozzie Smith was one of them, and he brought Vince Coleman. George Brett was there, and I'm trying to remember who he brought. I don't remember that just right now.
I assume he didn't bring Rush Limbaugh with him, who was a friend of his when he was with the Royals.
Yeah. But George Brett, and then Robin Roberts, who was the elder statesman, and he's passed away now too, and then Phil Niekro. And he brought his brother Joe. And I told you, John Warden was the MC, and everything was just a lot of fun. But Phil, could take a joke, but he was a great athlete. And he had to be in his 60s at that time. And he's out there throwing the ball and playing pepper and all this stuff with all of us campers. And I'm 10 years younger, but it didn't look like he could play. Ozzie Smith, it looked like he could still play. George Brett looked like he could still play because they're 10 years younger, so maybe more than 10 years younger. But
and the famous story, Joe Niekro hit exactly one homer in his major league career off his brother Phil.
And you
better believe, as the younger brother, Joe probably never let Phil forget, hey, I homered off you.
Unless Phil proved it.
That was the game-winning hit. In retrospect, talk about cards that would have been cool to have had. Could you imagine a dual sign card like that? Because both of them signed reasonably well, and maybe nobody thought about it. Phil Niekro, one of the things, Sports Card Insights, is that there's plenty of Phil Niekro signed cards out there. If you really want one, you can find one. It'll be reasonably priced after this brief spike when people remember him again. And you'll have a Hall of Fame autograph, and it won't be that expensive. And he was a very willing signer. That's one of the best parts of having the signed cards of today's world. Is being able to remember people like that.
If a guy's a willing signer. And I think, but when I looked at the Beckett OPG, the online price guide, they have a kind of a profile. You can look it up by player, look up Phil Niekro, and I find he's got a couple thousand cards. That's all. And the market cap of the ones that probably have 25 or more copies is less than $20,000. Way less than $20,000. So you think, oh, if I had $20,000, instead of buying one card of Luka, I could buy all the Phil Niekro, an example of every Phil Niekro card. That's not quite true because there's a not priced aspect of many of the cards that are numbered to less than, say, 20 or 25 in the OPG. And some of the one-of-ones would probably be in some demand as we speak. Kevin Green just passed away, and I'm having a run on Kevin Green. Phil Niekro, probably the same thing. When you get the greater scrutiny of his career and the fact that he wasn't just a boring knuckleball pitcher, he was an exciting knuckleball pitcher, the consummate teammate, a complete player, and even has one game where he threw a shutout later in his career without ever throwing a knuckleball.
Yeah, correct. It's actually a little more fun than that. It's the final game of the 85 season for his 300th win against the Toronto Blue Jays. And yes, he goes the whole game without throwing a knuckleball until the final batter, Jeff Burroughs.
Okay.
He does throw a knuckleball to Burroughs to end the game. But he basically went the whole game for his 300th victory just to show that he could win a game without the knuckleball. And it was really a cool story. And in New York, I think we got to see that game on TV. So it was really exciting to see him. Those days, the Yankees picked him up after the Braves let him go, and he was effective for a couple more years. Even though his career was ended, I did score props in 1988 for, in a sense, doing a farewell Phil Niekro card with the Atlanta Braves where he got to conclude his career. Today, we would call it a one-day contract. I think they signed him at the very end. They weren't going to be competitive in 87, so they let him come back and conclude his career with the Braves. It's a quarter card, but it's a career card. It has the career stats on it, and it's really a nice card. I think that's a great culmination of a playing card career. 24 years after his rookie card, he gets a final card.
One of the reasons he doesn't get enough hobby appreciation is because, and I don't know about the sabermetric folks, his won-loss record isn't that great. I mean, he won a lot of games, but he lost a lot of games. People forget that when he was on the Braves, it was right before they got good. When he was on the Braves, they weren't good. They went to the playoffs a couple times, but they made their great run right after he left. And so when you're pitching for a last-place team and you're winning more than you're losing, and they're losing a lot more than they're winning, you're a really good pitcher. We think of the Braves of a while back as making the playoffs every year. That was right after he left.
Yeah, that was a couple of years after he left. They make the playoffs in 69, the first year of divisional play, and then 82. And I believe he's 17-4 in 82. I think he wins 20 games in 69. Both years, he's really key to them going to the playoffs. 83, they're competitive again. They were a really good team, but then they went into the doldrums. He leaves after 83, and it takes a few years after that for the Braves to get good. But in the 70s, every year, the Braves are not really competitive. It's the Reds and the Dodgers in the NL West, and the Braves are an afterthought. They're the biggest thing for the Braves in the early 70s was Hank Aaron and the chase of 715, and everything else was basically an afterthought. And then when he doesn't have the greatest team behind him.
Right. Not fair. I think it's not
Plus,
fair.
he's playing in a ballpark which we called the launching pad at the time. It was the best home run hitting ballpark in baseball. So that also affected ERA, that affected all sorts of things. It was the best hitting park until Coors Field, Colorado comes along.
Okay, for his cards, you would say 64, go for it. 65, go for it. 66, not so much. 67, not so much. 68, go for it.
67 is, I think, a semi-high card. I would definitely maybe not use the word go for it, but I wouldn't reject it out. 66 and 68 get easy. 67 is my favorite set of the 60s. And it's a slightly more difficult card, so I don't want to reject. I would put it definitely third between 64 and 65, both of which are two-player rookie cards. 65 also has Clay Carroll, who's a pretty decent relief pitcher for his career as a rookie card, so it's not a bad card. And 64, as we said, was a high number, and then 67, and then he has a 72 semi-high, and I believe 73 is a little easier, but also a semi-high, and then it's just a matter of some of the weirder oddballs things that pop up along the way for his career. And then the sign cards of the last 20 years.
I guess Topps maybe still does this a little bit. Back in the day, when it was only Topps, the number of the card also demonstrated the esteem that Topps had for the player. And Phil Niekro did not get immediate respect.
Or the 5 a lot of the times to indicate he was a better player, but he didn't get the 50 or 100 that indicated, okay, these are our key players. Every once in a while, Topps would throw somebody really goofy into the, I think Clete Boyer's number 550 and 68. It's just a goofy thing that every once in a while they didn't get it quite right. But for the most part, if you were 100 definitely and 50 usually, and then the 25s were the third level. And I don't think he really got a lot of those during his career. He got card number 30, which means a little better player, but not the first level. or the second level, or maybe even the third level. Just a nice star, better player, deserving of respect.
Back in the simpler days when I was a kid, you'd wake up on a Saturday morning, you'd go to the neighborhood field, you just walk over there, there'd be a bunch of other kids over there. And occasionally there'd be a bigger kid or some kid that knew how to throw a knuckleball because it was starting to be a thing. Later in life, as I was playing different sports and different leagues and things like that, playing softball, but it's hard to throw a knuckleball with softball, but with a baseball, but it's hard to catch a knuckleball, much less hit a knuckleball if somebody really knows how to throw it.
That's why there are like no knuckleballers left in baseball. I believe the last knuckleballer in the last 5 years is a guy named Stephen Wright who pitches for the Red Sox. Yeah. And then taking Tim Wakefield's place, who was really the last full-time knuckleballer. Wakefield won 200 games in his career, and everybody's trying to, get these guys to throw 94, 95, 96, 98, 100. There's a place in baseball for the guy that doesn't throw 98. If you know how to pitch and you have something like that. We mentioned Joe earlier. One of the greatest rotations for a few years, until unfortunately James Rodney Richard got the stroke, was that for a couple of years, the Astros had, what they would do is they would pitch Nolan Ryan one day, Joe Niekro, the knuckleball, the next day, James Rodney Richard the third day. You have the fastball guy, you have the knuckleball guy, you have the fastball guy. If you face those three guys in consecutive games, your timing is goofed up for a couple of weeks after that. And baseball has become so analytical, and you're much better at analytical than I am. You have that PhD in statistics. I just do it instinctively. But there is something to be said for mixing it up like that instead of just trying to get everybody throwing 98 all the time.
I don't know how Phil decided to go to the dark side to be a knuckleball pitcher. And like I said, I spent a week with him, and I never thought to ask the question, and maybe I should have, because I don't think he threw his knuckleball in high school, but he was a late bloomer. And I'm just thinking, sometimes the guys go to knuckleball because, like Tim Wakefield, I think his stuff wasn't good enough. And then I was thinking, when was the last time somebody was a left-handed knuckleballer?
I don't think there's a really good one. I'll point out that Bob Uecker had caught a knuckleballer, and Barney Schultz, when he was with the Cardinals, I think, and Bobby Shantz, I think, occasionally threw a knuckleball by that point of his career too. He had experience, and he may have suggested to Niekro, "Hey, you've got something here, and I'll be your personal catcher, and let's go." And I think that changed his career. Hey, just start throwing this. I'll run to the backstop and get it for you.
Isn't that when they invented the giant glove?
Richard invented the giant glove with Hoyt Wilhelm in the late 50s, and Gus Triandos behind the plate.
Yeah.
But it's the same principle. They get the giant glove because you want to have more ways to bat it down because the ball doesn't go like a normal pitch.
When I was playing, I was a good base runner, and you would think you would be able to steal on a knuckleballer because the pitch is going to come in slow, the catcher's going to have trouble handling it, and you'd think anybody on first base is going to be on second.
It's all a matter of how you hold the runner on.
So do you think that's an aspect of Gold Glove?
I think that's an aspect to it, and he also fielded his position very well.
But I always think of Gold Glove just of fielding your position, but it may be that for a pitcher, the Gold Glove is also being savvy about holding base runners on. Because it's part
of it. Definitely is. Andy Pettitte should have won a Gold Glove in every year for the way he could pick people off first base, because you had to worry if you were on first base and Andy Pettitte was on the mound. Wait a second, I better not go very far. He can get me and make it look perfect for any umpire.
Do you think his move was perfectly legal, Andy Pettitte? Because I think
I think it was borderline, but I think by the time he got the reputation, nobody's going to call it anymore.
He got institutionalized, yeah.
Yes, and that happens. You get a good reputation, and you'll get the breaks. And there's something to be said for being a supremely talented athlete. And there's no doubt that both Niekro brothers and Hondo Havlicek were very good athletes, great athletes, and they lasted a long time. And in a sense, they got certain benefits of the doubt.
Phil Niekro was a superstar, and now he's passed away at 81 from cancer. And I'm thankful that those who try to find out what made him great, I think he was a really outstanding person and a quality athlete to stay at that level for that long. So thanks, Rich.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, listeners. Dig into Phil Niekro stats and cards and enjoy. He's absolutely worthy of having in your collection, and he's in mine. So thanks, everybody. We'll be back again tomorrow for another episode.